Win conditions in Hearthstone is any card which could single-handedly win you the game, but often needs support cards to help it shine. So in this list, we'll be going over the top 10 hardest win conditions to build a deck around. And at number 10, we have Dead Man's Hand. This 2-mana warrior spell simply shuffles a copy of each card in your hand into your deck. And just looking at this card, you may wonder how it could even be a win condition. And well, technically, you do need 2 copies of it to be considered one. You see, when you have 2 copies of Dead Man's Hand in your hand, and then you play one of them, you shuffle the new copy of Dead Man's Hand into your deck while still having one in your hand. This means if you're able to draw the extra copy from your deck and play it again, you can effectively have an unlimited deck and never go into fatigue. And a bonus this card has, since it shuffles a copy of your entire hand into your deck, any cards you want more of will also have a copy of it shuffled into the deck with it. This is the only deck that has seen competitive play on this list, but that doesn't mean it's not a hard win condition to pull off. It's almost never seen in any ranks above Legend, and even there, most players still haven't been able to master using it. Aside from Control Warrior decks already being extremely difficult to pilot optimally, Dead Man's Hand adds an extra layer of complexity when you have to consider which cards you want to shuffle into your deck with Dead Man's Hand. That's because even if you're shuffling good cards into your deck, any bad cards you're shuffling will be taking up space in your draws or hand. Or if you blow all of your good removal too early and can't shuffle extra copies into your deck with Dead Man's Hand, you could easily get overwhelmed. This deck is probably the hardest deck in the game's history to pilot, and has so many nuances and matchup-specific game plans that it's hard to list them all. And it's so hard, in fact, there's a very small cult-like following of Dead Man's Hand warrior players that are still trying to master this card and catalog its history to this day. This card has also been used in the past at just a single copy to shuffle your hand into your deck once, and has seen a moderate amount of success while avoiding the headache of a true Dead Man's Hand deck. That being said, it's not bad in casual decks, but trying to play this card as your sole win condition definitely lands it in the number 10 spot, due to how difficult it is to win with this card. And at number 9, we have Blood of the Ancient One. This 9-mana 9/9 has the effect where, if you control another Blood of the Ancient One, you destroy both of them and summon the Ancient One, which is a vanilla 30/30. This might surprise some older players, especially since this card was long considered to be one of the worst build-around cards in the game, because unlike a lot of the other win conditions on this list, the Ancient One doesn't immediately kill your opponent, and is super vulnerable to removal. The Bloods of the Ancient Ones are also just as vulnerable, have no protection, and you need 2 copies of this card to even get its full effect. So why is it so high on this list? It's because Blood of the Ancient One can actually slot pretty well into an already good deck, Big Priest. The way this deck usually plays is by stalling until they can play Shadow Essence, summoning a 5/5 copy of a minion from your deck, having it die, and then resurrecting the big minions to full size over and over again. And funny enough, Blood of the Ancient One was a very niche pick as one of Big Priest's few minions of choice, just because the Ancient One was so big. You see, with the Blood of Gahun also being able to summon 5/5's Blood of the Ancient One, it was actually pretty easy to have at least 2 copies of them aboard at the same time. And with how many giant threats Big Priest was able to pump out, it wasn't uncommon for opponents to just run out of single target removal by the time Ancient One came out. And the best part was, even if it died, Big Priest had so many resurrection effects that it could summon a full 30/30 over and over again. What was once laughed at for being bad, Blood of the Ancient One is better than the rest on this list, but only if you don't have to pay 9 mana for it. And at number 8, we have Star Aligner. This 7-mana 7/7 deals 7 damage to all enemies if you control at least 3 minions with 7 health. And since Star Aligner was a 7 health minion itself, that meant you only needed 2 other minions on the field with exactly 7 health. When this card first came out, it was laughed at as just another bad combo card with a condition that was too hard to pull off. And was it? Well, yes. Star Aligner was also too hard to use in any homebrew decks because Star Aligner's battlecry functioned off of current health and not maximum health. That meant that every time a 7 health minion got damaged, you would have to heal it up or play another one for Star Aligner's battlecry to trigger. Its effect truly was as hard as its name implied, and was pretty much ignored as a card until much later on in Wild. It started seeing very niche play when the Aviana Kun combo in Wild was already well known and quite optimized as an alternative combo that you could use to win. Star Aligner was pretty much just a worse version of Togwaggle Druid, but used the same shell as the deck. The only advantage this combo had was that you could draw most of your combo with Juicy Psych Melon, which drew a 7, 8, 9, and 10 mana minion from your deck, which would draw Star Aligner, Medivh, Aviana, which cost 9 mana back then, and Kun, the Forgotten King. Then on the combo turn, you would play Aviana, which would make all of your minions cost 1 mana, play Kun and refresh 10 mana crystals. Then you'd be able to play Medivh, your second 7 health minion, Bran Bronzebeard, which would double all your battle cries, and your 2 copies of Star Aligner, which did 14 damage to your opponent each. All of that to do 28 damage, plus 2 damage from swinging with Atiesh from Medivh and your hero power. Of course, you could easily kill most opponents, but the fact still stood that it was a much clunkier version of an already competitive deck. And at number 7, we have Uther of the Ebon Blade. This 9 mana hero gives you 5 armor, plus equips a 5/3 weapon that restores health each time it deals damage, and changes your hero power to the 4 horsemen. For 2 mana, it summons one of the 4 2/2 horsemen, and has the passive where, if you have all 4 unique horsemen, you destroy the enemy hero. This is one of the only effects of the entire game that can automatically win you the game without any counterplay. And because of the instant win effect, Uther decks have been experimented with a ton over the years to try to get this combo to be consistent. One of the most obvious limitations with this card is the instant win effect is tied to the hero card, which is very expensive and can't be easily searched out of the deck. You also can't have duplicate horsemen, otherwise the hero power passive won't trigger. The hero power naturally tries to summon any horsemen you're missing on the board, but if any bounce back to your hand, they won't be considered. The biggest challenge with this card is actually having the mana to either play a hero power 4 horsemen, which could cost up to 8 mana on your combo turn. It doesn't help that Control Paladin has always been bad, and just better in other classes. Uther's giant healing weapon does help a lot though, but the control tools Paladin has access to now are either nerfed or just bad. Most of the time you'll just get rushed down by aggro decks, and if you're lucky you'll die from a faster combo deck. By far, the best version of this very difficult combo is using Tour Guide the turn before to get a 0 mana hero power, Auction Master Beardo, which refreshes your hero power every time you cast a spell, and to play 3 cheap spells, and hope you have enough mana to press your hero power 3 more times. If Uther were printed in any other good control class, this card might actually see competitive play, but as it is, it's just another meme win condition that's very hard to pull off. And at number 6, we have Chef Nomi. This neutral 7 mana 6/6 can fill your board with other 6/6, but only if your deck is empty. Otherwise, it's just a 7 mana 6/6. This card is one of the weakest cards that needs you to be in fatigue to activate, and for good reason. Summoning a full board of 6/6 may sound really good on paper, but remember that by the time you play it, you and your opponent have likely both gone through your entire decks. Usually when playing to fatigue, your opponent will hold on to their good board wipes in case you play a major threat in the last couple of turns. And because Chef Nomi has to come out so late, it's almost guaranteed that your opponent has been able to find their good removal spell from the deck and easily wipe out Chef Nomi and your elementals. Another thing that makes Chef Nomi a pretty bad win condition is that it's really hard to get fatigue if you want to. In Hearthstone, all decks must contain 30 cards, but unlike other card games, burning cards in your deck is a rare effect, and has no synergy that cards could benefit from. There are small deck synergy cards, but most of the time, Nomi will just be a dead card if you ever draw it. Just about the best thing you can do to activate its effect is just to draw a lot of cards, which is already hard to do, or use Hemet to nuke your deck. Hemet is a card which burns all the cards in your deck that cost 3 or less, and is the fastest way to get to fatigue. The thing is though, Mecha Thune is just a much better win condition that needs fatigue and is an instant win card. Unlike Chef Nomi, who has to hope that your opponent doesn't have a single good board cleared to be a win condition. And at number 5, we have Immortal Prelate. This card is a Paladin 2 mana 1/2 that shuffles itself into your deck when it dies and keeps any buffs on it. This card is the minion version of Kingsbane, which is a much worse version. The most obvious difference is that unlike weapons, which can only be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, minions can be transformed, stolen, silenced, or bounce back to the hand. And when any of these things happened, Immortal Prelate will no longer have its permanent buffs, and can just be killed off easily. The way this card was intended to be used was throughout the game, you would try to play Prelate and any good buff spells you had, and hoped to draw it as many times per game since it could become massive fast. And since you could run 2 copies, you could also avoid a lot of fatigue damage since they shovel themselves back into your empty deck whenever they died. The thing is though, it really wasn't good in any matchups, especially in a Control Paladin deck. As mentioned, all the decks this card could be good against, namely against Control decks, run some form of removal that aren't just direct damage or destroy effects. This card has been included in bad versions of hand buff Paladins, which already bait a ton of silence effects before Immortal Prelate comes out. With the release of Alliance Bannerman and Catacombs Guard, hand buff became a very viable archetype, which was able to pump out huge, cheap minions. Of course, there are much better cards that synergize with hand buff more than Immortal Prelate though, since having the chance to essentially draw a big vanilla minion isn't that great. But it is a very accessible card for casual decks, which can just cram in 2 Prelates and as many buff cards as they can into it. And at number 4, we have Mogu Cultist. This neutral 1 mana 1/1 has the effect where if you play it and you have 6 other Mogu Cultists on the board, you can destroy them all and summon High Keeper Ra, which is a 20/20 minion that deals 20 damage to all enemies at the end of your turn. Mogu Cultist has never seen any competitive play, and for good reason. This is one of the many win conditions on this list that is useless without any other supporting cards, and its payoff isn't even that great. You see, since you need to have at least 7 copies of Mogu Cultist, you have to find a way to copy or shuffle copies of Cultist multiple times in a single game, since you can only run a maximum of 2 per deck. This card would also be much better if High Keeper Ra did 30 damage at the end of your turn instead of only 20, since the max health for heroes without armor is 30. As is, you need a way to get another copy of Ra to deal 40 damage to OTK your opponent, since most decks can easily deal with a 20/20 and beat you down from there. So not only does the Mogu Cultist combo require at least 7 cards and 7 mana, but you also need a way to copy Ra if you want to win. That is just utterly insane with the edge of viability for combos being 5 cards maximum. Not to mention all the support and draw cards needed to assemble the combo remotely fast. The best class this can be used in is in Rogue, and only because they have decent card draw and Togwaggle Scheme, which shuffles a copy of a minion into your deck for each turn you've been holding it. Again, this is a 10 mana, 8 card combo, meaning that almost your entire hand will be doing nothing while you're desperately trying to stay alive or hope you draw the rest of the combo. And at number 3, we have the Darkness. This neutral card is a 4 mana 20/20 that can't attack or be interacted with and shuffles 3 candles into your opponent's deck. When all 3 of them are drawn, the Darkness awakens and becomes a normal minion. This card essentially suffers from the same problems as Chef Nomi, except worse since your opponent already knows your win condition is coming. Not only does this card suffer from basically being a vanilla minion when it awakens, it doesn't really have any archetypes that synergize with its dormant condition. Even in mill decks, an archetype which tries to win by making your opponent draw cards and get them to fatigue, making your opponent overdraw can burn the Darkness candle cards and make it so your Darkness can't awaken. You see, when your opponent has 10 cards in hand, any more cards drawn from your opponent are instantly destroyed. And because you need all the candles to be drawn, anything that happens to overdraw for your opponent can make the Darkness a 4 mana that does nothing. The Darkness also just doesn't work that well in casual decks either, since by the time it awakens, the game has probably already been decided by then. Or being a 20/20, won't be big enough to do 30 damage with 1 attack and one-shot a full health opponent. Big minion win conditions that rely on fatigue, as you can tell by now, are really not that good because it's pretty rare for games to go into fatigue, and since most opponents will say the removal to counter such win conditions. The Darkness, though, suffers from these problems even worse because it's really hard to control how many cards your opponent draws, and since your opponent can see the Darkness while it's dormant. And at number 2, we have Desert Obelisk. This neutral 5 mana 0/5, at the end of your turn it deals 5 damage to a random enemy, but only if you control at least 3 Desert Obelisks total. This card is bad and wouldn't see play even if it dealt 5 damage as soon as you played it. Many people have tried to make this card work, and none have really succeeded. The thing is, at 2 copies per deck, Desert Obelisk is useless without any other ways to create more copies of it. And even if you do manage to get a full board of them, they are barely able to kill most full health heroes in a single turn. That's important since they can very easily be cleared by minions, can't even attack, and become useless if there's only 2 of them on the field. And what really cements Desert Obelisk in the number 2 spot is that the 5 damage it deals is random and can hit enemies, including enemy minions. So even if you somehow manage to assemble the full combo, something as simple as a 1/1 or any decent sized board can take the Desert Obelisk shots and save your opponent from an OTK. The only deck where you can even use this combo and actually work is in a Celestial Alignment combo deck, so that you actually have the mana to duplicate the Obelisk multiple times. Basically, you could play Celestial Alignment, which would set both players' cards' cost in mana crystals to 1, wait to gain enough mana crystals to play the combo, then play the Obelisk, 2 cubes, another to copy it, Deathwing, and end your turn having cleared your opponent's board with 6 Desert Obelisks on the field, OTKing your opponent. The problem is, this is a 5-card combo that needs to survive multiple turns after playing Celestial Alignment, which is risky for any deck. But in any other deck, it's almost impossible to have a clear enough enemy board with at least 6 obelisks so that you can OTK your opponent. And speaking of combos that are never seen, at number 1, we have Mimiron's Head. This 5 mana 4/5 has the effect where if you have at least 3 mechs in the field at the start of your turn, destroy them all and then summon VO7TR0N. This minion is the real win condition and is a 4/8 with charge and Mega Wind Fury, meaning it can attack your opponent immediately 4 times in a single turn. So off the bat, if you're able to summon Voltron, you can attack your opponent directly for 16 damage. And while this may all sound good, there's a good reason why Mimiron's Head is the hardest win condition to build around. Mimiron has so many problems as a win condition that it's hard to really start with one. Mechs, as an archetype, are just not that great when compared to others that can do much better stuff. As a tribe, most of their synergy comes from creating large single threats or swarming the board, and not even particularly well. On top of that, the summoning condition for Voltron doesn't exactly synergize with mechs and is one of the hardest effect types to get off in Hearthstone. You see, for Mimiron's Head's effect to go off, you basically need 2 other mechs on board, since it counts itself as a minion, and you need them all to survive until the start of your next turn, which gives your opponent a full turn to silence or kill Mimiron, one of your mechs, or all 3. And even when you are able to get off its payoff, you still have to boost its attack by at least 4 so that you can actually kill your opponent with it, instead of letting it sit and die. At least Desert Obelisk lets you damage your opponent directly at the end of your turn. Mimiron's Head needs you to attack 4 times, avoid getting blocked by taunts, and have at least 3 minions survive until your next turn. At the very best, using Mimiron's Head as your sole win condition is a 4-card combo that relies on your opponent having absolutely no removal, taunts, or ways to kill you during their turn. You basically have to play this card in Rogue with Conceal so that your other mechs have a chance to not die to minion combat, but they're still vulnerable to board clears while stealth. And because of its harsh condition, awful payoff, and need for bad support cards, Mimiron's Head takes the cake as the hardest condition to build your deck around. Alright, and that's the list. If you have any ideas for future videos similar to this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.